Live from our studio in Babson Park, Massachusetts, it's the Fred Opie Show, where we unpack history to positively impact the future. I am Fred Opie, your host. Thanks for joining us live or listening to the podcast. A native of Hunt Valley, Maryland, Princeton University alum Ryan Boyle is a 2019 inductee into the National Lacrosse Hall of Fame. He is one of the all-time scoring leaders in Princeton lacrosse history. He also earned all-star honors as a professional lacrosse player in both the indoor and outdoor leagues. Boyle is a three-time U.S. national team selection and the co-founder of Trilogy Lacrosse, as well as an ESPN lacrosse analyst. We unpack his oral history and lacrosse journey today on the Fred Opie Show. Your mom, was she an athlete that you know of?
She was an athlete, and she came from an athletic family. Her brother actually played football professionally, both NFL and CFL, and she's about as sharp when it comes to she's sharper when it comes to sports than just about every man that I engage with. She's pretty dialed in. She puts a lot of men in their places in terms of her acumen and intelligence.
Where is your dad from? Is he a Baltimore guy, and where's your mom from?
Yeah, both are Baltimore, from Baltimore.
And I know your brother was a baller as well?
He played at Georgetown, collegiately at Georgetown. My oldest sister played collegiately at James Madison, and then myself. We were the three collegiate lacrosse players out of the 6 children overall.
Where are you in the pecking order?
5th of 6th, the youngest of the three boys. Did
you grow up in a family of lacrosse junkies, or what's the deal?
Certainly played catch with my dad, and my dad, helped coach growing up. But in terms of the nuance of the sport, the strategic elements, the technical elements, I probably learned most from my oldest brother in the backyard more than really anybody else in terms of formative years.
4 or 5 block radius. What was it like where you grew up?
When I was really young, we lived in kind of the Timonium area. Cockeysville, Timonium, Lutherville, it's kind of all one big kind of suburb, kind of classic suburb, like, just a few blocks away from a public school in terms of, the basketball courts and their soccer fields and baseball fields, and, all that was, kind of an extension of our backyard. If you were ever, didn't know what to do, it was like, well, go practice your free throws and layups, or go throw the ball against the wall, or, go grab a baseball bat and, go pitch and catch and try to hit a baseball and go play sport. Go in the backyard and kind of figure it out. A lot of it was playing against my older brother and next door neighbor. They were best friends, and, playing pickup touch football or something along those lines. There was a lot of that kind of in the neighborhood, and I credit a lot of, my kind of athletic success to, having to play against, other athletes in terms of pickup basketball and things like that that were older, bigger, faster, stronger, and just trying to, figure it out and kind of, on the fly. 4th grade, we moved to a different neighborhood. It was a little bit more of kind of those kind of planned neighborhoods, so it didn't have kind of that same feel to it.
Were your mom and dad products of public or private schools, high schools particularly?
Private. So my dad went to Loyola, so they were, and then before going to West Point, my mom went to St. Mary's, which eventually turned into Loyola.
Lacrosse around the country is really different in terms of public or private. So I'm a Westchester County guy, grew up in the Hudson Valley. Croton-on-the-Hudson, the border town to mine is Yorktown, which most people know in the lacrosse community. So lacrosse really in Westchester is a public school dominated sport. When you go to Baltimore, it's the opposite. It is private school dominated. Your dad went to Loyola. How was the decision made for you? Was it your choice to go to Gilman, or how did that play out?
This is where kind of the fun intricacies and nuance and of like the wire really comes into play, where this is more of a societal issue looking at Baltimore public schools and by context looking at the state of Maryland versus the state of New York and how taxes work and then how does that get funneled to various institutions and programs, and at least in my parents' eyes the access to public schools in our community just wasn't as strong, and they really valued education. I was raised Irish Catholic, My dad went to Loyola, my oldest brother went to Loyola, my two older sisters went to Notre Dame, but my brother just didn't really have a good experience at Loyola, based off of his kind of negative experience there. And that's no kind of knock on them and where they are now and things like that. Just it wasn't a good fit for him. That really opened the doors and said, let's kind of look at some other places. And that's where I got the opportunity to, speak to people about Gilman, go visit and do a tour. Fell in love with the institution and what they stood for, and it was really a great fit, a great match for me, and not really in a good place mentally or spiritually in my middle school. Kind of felt the need to make a move, and was very, very fortunate and blessed to find Gilman.
Calvert Hall, Gilman, Loyola, BL. I mean, all the big lacrosse schools, Severin. On average, what does it cost to go to school there?
My understanding of where those prices have gone is certainly insane. I hope that they are still in position to find people like me and like some of my peers where we relied on financial aid to help out at Gilman. Hope that they're able to continue to do that as prices across the board kind of soar and really make it challenging for certain families.
And I'm glad you mentioned financial aid, because a lot of families don't know that some of these great schools, you can apply for financial aid. And the other thing, too, I think people in the audience should know, the new tax code allows families to use the 529 not just to pay for college, but also to pay for private school education, so that you have a tax break. You can start saving for that child at a young age, and by the time they get to the age of applying to a Gilman, they can use that 529 to pay for this as a tax advantage. So that's something that a lot of people don't know. Thank you for talking about that. You played football. Did you play for Joe Ehrman? Was he one of your coaches?
I did, yeah. Joe Ehrman was my coach for 3 seasons, sophomore through my senior year. My sophomore year was his first year at the school.
Joe Ehrman is a Syracuse alum. He was drafted by the Baltimore Colts. He was an all-pro athlete there. His last year at Syracuse, he didn't have to do spring football. He had been seeing the lacrosse players out there playing for Coach Roy Simmons Jr., and they looked like they're having such great opportunity to play. So he decided in his senior year, before the draft, to go out and play lacrosse at Syracuse. Loved it, absolutely loved it. Had his career, had boys and daughters who were athletes. One of his sons certainly played at Georgetown. And then he spent a long time coaching at the same school that Ryan went to. And an excellent book I'm going to plug, Joe, you can pay me later for this, is his book, Inside Out Coaching, which also talks about Coach Simmons as one of the prototypes of transformative coaches. Tell me, what impact did he have on you while you played under his tutelage?
Throw one more plug in there for you from a book perspective is the Season of Life, Jeffrey Marks. I mean, he's just an incredible man. The first person to kind of plant a seed in terms of, for me, just the importance of relationships in life and experience that was, on the inside as opposed to, just kind of reading about it. Having gone through that is truly impactful, and I feel very blessed to have had that experience.
Did you consider playing both sports in college? How did that work out in the process of you making your decision where you're going to go to college?
As I progressed through football, I was certainly serious about it. I took it very seriously. But in terms of playing collegiately, I never got really any serious looks. I didn't. 2 sports in college, it seemed like biting off too much.
Where were the places that you checked under the hood in terms of colleges before you made your decision?
I went to official visits to Duke, Virginia, Johns Hopkins, and Princeton.
What was it about Princeton that made you decide to go there?
The ultimate combination of athletics and academics. On top of that, arguably, the best, institution in the country in terms of from an academic perspective. At that time, arguably the top athletic programs. The best degree and win a national championship kind of in the same place. I kind of just looked in the mirror and was like, I think you'd be pretty stupid to turn this down. On top of that, being, 2.5 hours away felt like the right distance. If I need to get home, if, my parents being able to see me play, it felt right in terms of the distance. And then in terms of, culturally, the Gilman to Princeton, pipeline. It was kind of way back in the day when it was like the Gilman School for Boys, and there was like 12 kids. Like all 12 would go to Princeton. Within my class there was 5 that went there. Not all athletically, some just straight academics. I had a few friends from in the classes above me. So just in terms of comfort level, in terms of culturally, I felt like kind of going there was kind of a built-in system. Not just everybody, the team would have been fine, but kind of within that there were some people that I really knew and really trusted. So I knew that in terms of seamless transition that would be I thought a good fit.
You mentioned the distance from Baltimore, and I think this is a really important factor that I wanted to stop and say something to the folks that are listening. 2.5 hours. Mom and dad can come see games. It's almost like a perfect distance where you can get home if you need to get home and get a good home-cooked meal, do some laundry. If there's a homecoming game at Gilman, which I know that what's the Gilman, McDonough, that's the big game, right? Mm-hmm. Football. Mm-hmm. I mean, so you have the ability to get that. Now, I bring that up because there are student athletes who are making that decision for next year or the year after that, and some of them are looking at schools that are on the West Coast. I've also heard people say that if you're newly married, rent your first year or two so you have enough experience to know how close do you actually want to live to your in-laws. And I think college is the same way. How close do you want to be to home? It's just something to think about. Do you have any thoughts about that now that you've done with school in the distance factor?
I live in New York now, but the idea of living in an urban environment at 18 years old was way too much for me. There's this huge laundry list of factors, and sometimes I think people get kind of just overwhelmed by all the different things that can go into the decision. Kind of what matters or what feels right. What are the things that you actually care about? My parents had been to every single game I'd ever played, and they're not like big travelers. One of 6 children, and so the home life was something that I still kind of needed. That being said, if I had stayed in Baltimore, that would have been too small, and I would have still been in kind of that bubble of Baltimore. And I don't know if I would have ever gotten out. Not that that's a bad thing, but like I needed to have a little bit of kind of separation from what I had grown up in, but wanted to do so in a manner that was maybe dipping my toe into the water as opposed to, a full dive. That was what made sense to me. That was what was comfortable to me, and that's where I felt kind of most confident. For some people, going to the West Coast or being super far away, that's what they need. Some people staying in their backyard, is what they need. Just understand kind of what you're looking for, what your preferences are, and let that kind of guide your decision making. And sometimes it's just a gut feeling, but that your gut's a pretty strong and pretty intuitive tool.
The show will be right back. For related content on negotiating the world of school and sports, visit our website at fredopie.com. Check out our podcast archive and review the show on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and iTunes. You can purchase a copy of my autobiography / career advice, Start With Your Gift, on Amazon.com. We are the sum total of the people we spend time with and the books we read. Be a difference maker right now. Purchase 2 or more paperback copies of Start With Your Gift. Give them away and make a positive impact on someone's life. The book is available in digital form as an ebook and audiobook. Welcome back to this edition of The Fred Opie Show. You're now an entrepreneur. If you were going to go back to college, would you have changed your major or had a different minor added to it?
I wouldn't have changed my major. I think I probably would have looked at a few course selections and maybe rethought them. What I was able to learn from a psychology perspective, more specifically cultural stuff, I still use, to this day, and is really impactful. And it interested me, and that was the thing that why I don't regret the decision, because if you're going to write a thesis and you're going to major in something at Princeton, you kind of have to be into it. I mean, otherwise you're really going to struggle. The great Professor Daniel Kahneman, kind of, Thinking Fast and Slow, that bestseller. We were studying that back in that period. I really appreciative of being able to learn so much about decision making and framing and them, really pushing back on a lot of economic behavioral theories, blowing a lot of them up, or at least discrediting a fair amount of them.
To graduate from Princeton, this is what you got to do in terms of that thesis.
Every senior, in order to graduate, has to write a senior thesis, a 60 to 100 plus page paper. First person research, secondary literature, it's pretty expansive. Citing your sources and understanding if they're first person interviews that you're conducting, or other pieces of literature that you're referencing. It's pretty kind of all inclusive. It's really the great equalizer, kind of, if you will, of the school. Why everybody, I think, at least has a baseline level of respect. It's like, well, you got through that, huh? You graduated. You're okay. The nightmare's over.
How did you and your parents pay for your undergraduate degree at Princeton?
I was on financial aid. That was grant-based as opposed to student loans to get a really attractive financial aid package.
So important for people out there to not shy away from the Ivies because of the price tag. Financial aid, if you qualify, it's there. And the fact that, as you just said, people be careful when somebody offers you a financial aid package to any school and they say your education can be paid for, because you got to break down grants versus loans. Loans are, to me, crazy, and avoid them like the plague. And you can get grants. Negotiating with a financial aid and say, look, instead of that loan, can my son or can my daughter do a work study job? There are a lot of options other than just thinking you have to take loans.
I worked the whole time I was at school, and then before school, the other thing just of note for your listeners is there's a lot of scholarship programs. So like my father worked at McCormick for 30 plus years. And they had an internal program that my family, applied to and was fortunate enough to generate some scholarship dollars there through, their eligibility within their corporate program. Oddly enough, there was a Greater Baltimore football scholarship, and based off my performance in high school, specifically my senior year, I earned, money through that would go towards my college education, even though I didn't play football.
If I had a child who was a sophomore or junior right now, I'd dedicate an hour a night or 30 minutes a night to going online and looking up all these available financial aid, scholarship funds. I mean, from $100 to $50 to $1,000, you could have your child. There's a couple of websites. I'll make sure I look them up and link them to this show, where people can do the research. And it's not people, it's your kid. The kid wants to go to school. Make them take the time and look up all these local scholarships, from Kiwanis Club to Lions Club to everything. And this football one, wow, that sounds amazing. But it's money, folks. Yeah. It's money. It's free money. If you were going to create a required course before one graduates from college to get ready for life, what kind of course would you create?
I think I would start with, how do you create and manage a budget? Like a home ec. I was really lucky that I cooked in college and enjoyed it. A lot of my friends, when they got out, were like calling me like, how do you cook this? I have no idea what I'm doing. Some sort of like, how do you grocery shop and how do you cook for yourself? You have to be able to use Microsoft Excel. How important specific that tool becomes in importance in terms of organization across so many industries, so many positions, and how little people know how to use it when they first get out. And then like general writing skills is another thing that I think is just like language as we know it is evolving right now. And yet, despite that, like how you write an email, I think is pretty important. And yet, because it's like almost like a lost art in terms of writing, because we're watching so much videos as opposed to reading, and then the bulk of our writing is constituted in, either, well, I guess Twitter just bumped up, but 148 characters.
When and how did you decide to become a lacrosse entrepreneur vis-a-vis Trilogy Lacrosse?
I'd been in kind of the lacrosse education since I was in high school, and I'd done overnight camps, done day camps, had helped out peers in terms of getting them up to speed, training them. Always kind of found myself back on the lacrosse field in some sort of teaching and education fashion. After graduating college, had my mind made up that myself and my best friend, we were going to kind of travel the country and not take jobs, and really wanted to see the country and spend some time in traveling. And so kind of leading up to that, had the opportunity to do some camps in New Jersey, one for an old friend and former teammate that was helping out and coaching kind of in Montclair, New Jersey. And he asked me to kind of come up and help out. Gladly wanted to do that. And then, upon hearing about this, my best friend and other co-founder kind of said, "Hey, I think this is really going to work out in my beach town at New Jersey. Like, do you think we could do that? Let's do it. Like, I think this would be a great idea." And then at the end of that, those few weeks, we kind of looked at each other, and we were just blown away at the impact that we could make on a community, in just 1 week. Because I had been in the industry for 10 years, I already knew that from a product standpoint that our curriculum and organization and it was pretty strong and a lot better than a lot of other events that I had been to and worked at. We thought that there was, based off our experience and the impact we were able to make, the joy that brought us personally, and understanding the industry, that I had seen over the last decade, we thought that there was a void that we could fill from an education perspective. And then you look at kind of the overall growth, and it's growing nationally and kind of all over the place, and yet there aren't authentic torchbearers, there aren't dads that play, there aren't mentors, there just isn't enough coaching to kind of keep up with that growth. And so there's this huge need to fill that void. And so that's where we thought there was an opportunity, and that's why we just decided to start the company back in 2005.
How did you come up with the name Trilogy Lacrosse?
Refers to kind of the three facets of life in terms of mind, body, and spirit, and when those three things are aligned and in harmony, that's when someone's going to kind of reach their apex, whether that's an athlete, a musician, a doctor, what have you. But it's combining the technical and understanding that there's a physical way to do something in the most efficient manner, and then you kind of combine that with the mental and the IQ awareness and understanding the why of behind kind of all those actions, and then combining that with a passion, putting all your energy towards something, being all in. And when those three things are combined, I think a beautiful thing.
What is something you thought about being an entrepreneur that now that you've been doing it for a long time, you realize you had it totally wrong?
I don't think I realized how much people would be willing to help. Your peers and your network, all you have to do is ask for help. And there's going to be people that are so willing, that want to see you succeed and are so willing to help. All you have to do is really ask. You can't look to the outside to save you. Like, you have to do it yourself.
I call it the jerk factor. In the lacrosse fraternity and sorority, if you're a good person, it will have a positive ripple effect that is long-lasting and life-changing. But so it is if you're a jerky. It pays just to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. What qualities do you look for when you go to hire, not only just hire, but promote, and when you green light a team member or a project? How do you go about assessing those decisions?
Humility, especially in like a small business. There can't be any task that is beneath you or below you. To put things in perspective, myself and the entire company are going to support one individual who manages our merchandise, and we're going to take Under Armour merchandise and we're going to take it out of its plastic wrapping, and then we're going to rebox it and count the inventory such that we're supporting him in ensuring that everything that we ordered we got, and then minimizing our shipping impact and making sure that a task that would take him 6 hours on his own, across X amount of people takes 30 minutes. So humility would be something that I really appreciate. An ownership mentality, whatever project that you're taking on, you got to own that, and you got to treat that like that's your baby. What is the pride that you would have in your work? Attention to detail is something that I really value. Intelligence and bringing, whether that's actual kind of book smart or emotional intelligence, understanding kind of how interpersonal dynamics work, how to treat people with respect, how to be thoughtful and strategic in terms of how you're approaching your individual work and the company as a whole. Communication skills, both internally and externally. When and how and in what format do you communicate with people? Those are some things that I guess are qualities or traits that immediately come to mind.
When and how did you become an ESPN lacrosse analyst?
When my NLL career ended, and I said, man, there's all this free time, I should try to fill it up with work. I approached my great friend Matt Strebel, who had done a game the year prior, and I said, hey, just curious kind of how that came about, what you thought. You think you'd be good at it, or do you kind of wanted to bounce things off of him? And he was really the catalyst for connecting me with John Vassallo. I'm from ESPN, and JV is just an incredible person and an incredible man, and I'm really lucky enough that he took a shot on me. They had the training wheels on early, so my very first game was a 3-man booth with Mike Corey and Quint. That way, I think if I just completely messed up or was totally mute, it wouldn't have mattered because Quint was there to kind of save the day. And I guess fortunately there was enough there in that first game that we were able to move on and then do a few more games. And even those next few games where I was by myself were on ESPN3 back when ESPN3, like the joke of like ESPN Ocho, I think that was probably like a little closer to home than it is now. So
if you could have dinner with 3 people, dead or alive, what 3 people would you want to have dinner with, and why these 3?
Favorite athlete growing up, and obviously just fascinating personality. Michael Jordan, I'd want him to be at the table. And then in terms of culture, on the musical side, probably my favorite band is Wilco, so I'll probably go with Jeff Tweedy. And then my other hobby or love would be food. The easy one would be Anthony Bourdain, but the best meal I've ever had or David Chang. But I think the best meal I've ever had in my life, so I'll go with the chef Eric Ripert.
Ooh. Since your freshman year at Princeton, how have your eating, drinking, and working out habits changed?
Well, my workout habits have definitely decreased significantly. My eating habits are probably, much more refined. Just eat healthier, now. Cook more of my meals as opposed to when I was a freshman, but much more broad range from a palate perspective in terms of what I eat, what I enjoy. Much more mindful of when I eat and when I eat it. Certainly the coffee intake is skyrocketed from my freshman year. And I would probably say drinking as well. God only knows what they served at the Princeton eating clubs, but I imagine that same brand hasn't touched these lips in probably since the last time I was back at schools.
We were going to circle back with you because there's enough food stuff that I also have a food blog that you mentioned, the Princeton Eating Club. I'm making a note of that. We're going to have to circle back. What is the kindest thing someone has ever done for Ryan Boyle?
Hard for me to look at the word kind and not go super sentimental and just immediately go to my parents and just for loving me and raising me and look at the woman I'm in love with right now and loving me back.
Oh man, he's getting soft on us, folks. I like what you said. I'm playing with you.
Can't ask an Irishman like a simple question like that. We just get way too earnest, way too sincere.
What kind of kid were you?
I was an itch. Really annoying. Yeah. I have this memory of reading, my brother and I, we were on bunk beds. I was reading a book the word nuisance kept popping up in the book, and I didn't know what it meant. And I kept asking him, and the irony, pardon the small child, but the irony of a little brother asking an older brother what the word nuisance meant over and over and over again. Apparently that irony was lost on me.
When is the last time that Ryan Boyle has cried, and why?
My parents got me a dog when I was in college. Which is a whole different, we can analyze that psychologically for a separate one. But so he lived to be about 15, and he recently passed away. He was living at home with my parents, and everything was fine from afar. But I kind of knew when I got home that he was bottling it up and whatnot. But my parents elected to bury him kind of on their property, and so on the way driving home, last time I went home, on the drive back, I kind of stopped by where they buried him, and the ground was still, like the dirt was still fresh, and I went out and visited his grave or his burial site and just lost it.
What was his name?
Gus.
Wow.
The Gus man.
Wow.
He's a basset hound.
Wow, that's a deep one, man. Thank you for sharing that. I want you to write a book of success, and my definition of success is having the most positive impact you can on the world around you. And I just want to know, what would be 3 chapter titles over your 7 to 10 chapters? What would you title 3 of the chapters so people could see Ryan Boyle's book of success to have a positive impact on the world?
Listen to your mother. Keep good people. Keep friends around you. Trust your gut.
As I tell my students when I teach them how to write, I say, be simply profound. And I think those chapter titles, they knock it out of the park. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to come on the show. My promise was to make this experience positive and memorable. I hope I accomplished that goal. And I'm definitely going to circle back to have you on the food show, because I didn't realize you were a bit of a gourmand.
Oh, I will happily talk food with you for as many times and as long as you would like.
I will make sure you get a copy of the show. You now have a document of your family history and your lacrosse career that you can share with your nieces and nephews and the rest of the family, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
That's a wrap for this show. Thanks for listening. To hear more content like it, go to fredopie.com. If you have questions about advertising and sponsoring this show, contact us at fdopie@gmail.com. That's fdopie@gmail.com.